Dude, Sage, episode 1. Welcome to Action Figures. I didn't even tell you what the name of the podcast was.
Oh, yeah.
Action Figures. Yeah. Appreciate you being on here, sending the first episode.
Dude,
first episode. And we were kind of talking before we went live, like ships in the night a little bit. I see you every once in a while.
Yeah.
It's like, I want a way to sit down with guys like you and actually chat it up, because I think the last time I saw you was at the bike park and you were with Chandler and you had like a full camera rig like on your backpack. I didn't know what you guys were doing, but yeah,
totally.
Yeah. So obviously, you've been in the ski game forever, and that's what most people know you as. So yeah, I'm stoked to chat with you. And obviously I'm just an absolute action sports lover. And yeah, so this is why I decided to do this and hopefully kind of build this community here in Central Oregon, because there's a lot of rad people. I did a little research on you, did a little digging, and I think it's going to be tough because not a lot of action sports guys' history is on the internet. They're kind of closed off, but you grew up in Alta.
Yeah.
And,
but not Utah.
Yeah.
Not where everyone knows.
Right. But how did you get here if Targhee was your home resort?
Yeah, totally. Well, yeah, dude, first of all, thanks for having me on, and love the podcast. Like you said, Central Oregon is this cool place where a lot of people have ended up or lived here their whole lives, but in all different sports. And I think that's one of the things I love about being here. But how did I get here? Yeah, I think it's easy to see now. I first moved here in 98. And really the way it happened was that my dad was from Oregon, and my parents were split up from a pretty young age. And so I lived in Wyoming, Alta, skied at Targhee and spent time in the Tetons kind of growing up. But every summer I would come out to Oregon. My dad lived on the North Umpqua River, so 3 hours south of here. And I just spend time in Oregon every year. And part of that would be like at Christmas time, I would come visit him as well. And occasionally we'd come over to Bend and we'd hit up Willamette Pass. We'd go do like a ski day while I was visiting for Christmas. And so that was sort of my program as a kid, was living in Wyoming, going to Oregon every summer. Having parents split up has its ups and downs. And one of the ups was that I got to live in two cool places. Yeah. And it kind of be exposed to traveling a little bit. It made it easier for, when I got out of high school to like be comfortable bouncing and just being like, yeah, I'm going somewhere else. And really it was skiing that brought me here, because I wanted to ski, and I graduated high school and I felt like I should probably go to college of some sort and I kind of like living in Wyoming. So I lived in Alta, Wyoming, but it's 2 miles from the Idaho border. Mm-hmm. So I went to middle and high school in Idaho. And so I lived in Wyoming, went to school in Idaho. I had residency. Like I could go to Idaho or Wyoming schools because of that dynamic. Since my dad lived in Oregon, I had residency in Oregon as well. And so just trying to take the inexpensive route to college. And it was like, well, I got kind of like 3 states that I can choose from, which was pretty cool. But the only place I really that I saw a college that I could ski out of was here in Bend. And it was COCC Community College. But I was just like kind of going on the like appeasing your parents sort of. I just wanted to ski and figured college was good. But I was just like, I'll go 2 years in Bend and then I'll figure it out from there. I'll do a transfer program. But moved here, I skied not a ton when I first got here because I was just broke college kid. And I started working at the MBSEF, and I didn't have a pass, but they had the sickest program where you would work one day and get 2 lift tickets for 2 other days. I don't think they don't do this anymore, but they used to give you 2 lift tickets. And on the day that you worked, it was like gatekeeping. You'd hang out by the race course. And even on the day that you worked, you get to make some runs. And so that was my first season here. It was just working MBSEF and shredding. I probably got like 30 days though, still just out of that. So that was kind of cool. Got a midweek pass the next year, and then was going to college also, but had a midweek pass because I was like the cheap pass. So school, I had to like make a compromise. So of course it was college, and
yeah.
And so then, just started skiing here, and then that kind of like got me all fired up, and kind of Batchy was like this crazy connection. I mean, maybe I would have figured out another way, but I think there was this one, when you look back on your life, there's a few like pivotal moments that happen where something, you either get an idea or you meet somebody and it sort of changes your life forever. And there's a day at Mount Bachelor that happened to me. And it was the second year, and I was like skiing in the spring. Batchy in the springtime, it's pretty low key, and it's this cool vibe because there's just a couple lifts running. Everyone there is super into being up there. If you're skiing and snowboarding in the spring, you're kind of like a diehard but it's one of the best times of year to be up there. And I'm lapping, and I see this other dude. I'm on the summit chair, and I see this other dude with twin tips, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to wait for this guy, because twin tips had like just come out. Right. And I just got a pair.
Yeah.
And so I was like, who is this guy? Right. And right up the chair with him, we go over to the summit, and the dude just like backflips off like the summit, the cornice basically, which is like the cornice hit. If you don't know, a Batchy is the iconic send spot. Yes. Right. Yeah. Like, and he just backs off of like huge backflip, the next running front flip. And I'm just like, who is this dude? And it was this guy named Chris Collins. And he had so later I'm like, we keep skiing all day. And I'm like, dude, where did you come from? Who are you? Like, you're the sickest skier I've ever seen. Yeah. And he's like, oh yeah, well, I just got done. I live in Utah in the winter, and I live in Oregon, and his family was from Baker City. So like kind of, not too far from here. Yeah. But, and he's like, yeah, I was just filming with TGR. I just hit Chad's Gap, and I started like digging all this information out of him. And I'm just like, whoa, dude, you're a guy, you're like this head. And so we skied a handful of days while I was visiting here. And it was sort of just it was kind of the first time I had met anyone that was a full on pro skier that I got to hang out with. And, this rad dude. And then, so like Bend was kind of this critical link to me, because it was through that meeting that I then like went down this path and became a pro skier. And I just always look back to that, like one day, that decision of like looking back and like, I'm going to wait for this random dude to ride up the chair with. Yeah. How that changed my life.
Yeah. If you wouldn't have waited there, who knows what would have happened. Exactly. Yeah. And that wasn't when. Now it's like everyone's a pro or trying to be a pro, or it's become such a thing. That was back when it was just emerging.
Yeah, totally. Right. The whole scene was emerging at that point. And yeah, so like right at that time, freestyle skiing had been going on. There was already this kind of group of freestyle skiers that were pushing, like learning new tricks. And the trick thing was kind of like all cracking. And then this other side of skiing was like the go big side. And that was this group of people in Utah for the most part. And they were building these huge, it was the Chad's Gap and the Pyramid Gap and all these huge kind of jumps that now are just commonplace in every ski and snowboard kind of film, or, every pro rider essentially has like gone and hit these jumps because they're iconic. But these guys were part of this group who were kind of just cracking the door open to seeing like, how big can you go? Cool tricks are sweet, but what tricks can you do and go massive? And how massive can you go? And they were really kind of finding that line and kind of pioneering those big jumps, figuring them out, going bigger and bigger. There was one that they hit. I think they ended up calling it the Leviathan. It was like 170 feet. And that was like max. And I remember seeing the footage of the dude hitting, and it's just kind of, it's almost like he's skydiving or something. Yeah. And it was sort of like, that's too big. Yeah. Like 120 was Chad's Gap, 90s, you go about 100 feet on Pyramid Gap. And there was a few others that were this, kind of similar size. And in Utah, because of its mining history, it's cool how history comes into all. But mining history, all these tailing piles, the tailing piles are like the perfect like kind of shape for a landing. build a kicker way off. So it was a crazy era to see all this stuff going down, and things were just sort of ballooning to, on both sides of things, like what can happen? What can people do? And, and I was just kind of, like snuck in there.
And were you, before you met Chris, were you like were you knew about it, or were you trying to like ride and do tricks and go big, or did that kind of open your eyes to that side of riding?
It definitely opened my eyes to it. I didn't have a huge bag of tricks. I was, I kind of like had done some racer background, so I sort of knew how to make a good turn and could ski pretty well and ski. And the way I got those twin tip skis was a big air contest at Mount Bachelor.
Oh, sick.
I entered a big air contest and I was like, I didn't know how to do tricks, but I was like, I can go big.
Yeah.
And I did. The trick is so classic. It's such a skier move too. So I did a screaming seaman mute grab. Screaming seaman is like, you cross your ski over, and then I grabbed and like tweaked it back and then uncrossed and stomped like to the bottom. The dude who won did a Misty 7, which is, a corked 720. I'd never even seen that trick before. I didn't even know, didn't know it existed. And I got second place and I won a pair of twin tip skis. And then that was like, that went off. But, so I kind of had a little bit of that. Well, I was like, I'm not I just learned about these tricks. I can kind of go big. I get that vibe. And so then meeting Chris and this Utah crew, and eventually I moved to Utah. And the first year there, by the spring of that year, we were building up Pyramid Gap, and ended up, that was like the next kind of moment.
That was like the TGR moment.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So of course I had been watching TGR movies from like a high school kid. They first came out, I think, in 96. And so I was in high school at that point. And my homies and I, every lunch, we would leave the school, go over to my buddy's house who was like 5 blocks from school, and we would put in a ski movie and like watch ski movie for 20 minutes while we ate lunch. Yeah. We were just so into it. So we of course knew all about TGR, and then I just went to Utah. It was another thing, like meeting Chris. I definitely kind of knew about pro skiing. Like it had become a thing. There was these ski movies, and there was a free skiing tour. It wasn't like the Free Ride World Tour like it is now, but it was the whatever precursor to that. And I remember telling Chris, and I had sort of decided that like summer or whatever, I was like, all right, I did 2 years of school. I think I'm going to take a break and I'm going to go pursue skiing and somehow. And it was just all coming from like, I just love to do this and I just want to do this. And it seems like this pro skiing thing is a way that I can ski a lot. It wasn't so much that I wanted to be, I mean, I guess I did, but it was more just like, I wanted to just do it as much as I could. Yeah. And this seemed like a route. So I'm like, I meet Chris and I'm telling him that I wanted to, I think I want to do this free skiing tour thing. I'm going to, go on, I'm going to save my money this summer. I'm going to go on tour. He was just like, dude, don't do that. Why? You should just move to Utah. Just get a job at one of the ski lodges, come ski with us every day. And he's like, that's what I did. And so that's just, the young, kind of whatever excited mind, something like that. You're just like, oh, okay. Yeah. I'm going to do that. So that's what I did. Yeah. Yeah. That's similar to what I did when I met Brant. Cause I was like, dude, he's the guy. Right. Like, so I went and rode with him. My dad helped me pay for a trip for senior graduation and rode with him. And by like the end of the weekend, I was like working for the dude. And then I gave him a resume. I was like, I would love to work here. And then he doesn't call me back for like 6 months. So I was like, I'm going to college at Colorado Mountain College so I could be 20 minutes away from his shop. And then no way. Yeah. Yeah. And then I just was like, hey, if you ever need anything. And then all of a sudden, just like working my ass off, like I didn't even finish a term. I just was like, one day I just quit going because Chris gave me the job. This is it now. I'm in. Yeah, this is what we do. Yeah. So like meeting those people and finding that opportunity and then just like, all right, let's make a decision. Yeah.
Like, let's go after this. Yeah.
It's interesting. Like you said, now there's so many paths, like with social media, and there's all these all these avenues to kind of becoming a pro rider or whatever. And the bottom line is, I mean, we didn't even there was very limited options in that, like, getting started, I feel like. But what worked and what still works is that putting yourself around the right people and in the right places, and then working hard and just showing up and doing what you do, that's going to get you places in life, no matter what the stage or what you're trying to do.
For sure. Yes. And I mean, you were before me as far as the, like, watching ski films and stuff. I would say you kind of grew up through it, and I watched it as I grew up. It was a little bit ahead. But I remember, like, Tony Hawk 900 X Games. Like, that was like one of my first, like, vivid memories of, like, what is that?
Yeah.
And then just like Pastrana double backflip and all of these like iconic action sports moments. And it was, for so long, it was movies. It's always movies.
Right.
And like, when it was, do you still think that, like, the movies hold the power they do, or like that? You've obviously seen that landscape change.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of weird because there was something special about that period, like you said, where there was only these certain opportunities that you were able to get exposed to those crazy things that were happening. And they were either movies or they were contests, and the contests that were broadcast, or it wasn't even like we were watching on the internet. You basically had to, like, tune in to watch it. But there was something special about that, where it was limited in its how much saturation there was. And then you looked forward to it more. And I guess to me now, looking back at it, what was cool about it is that, I guess once I started doing it, is you're out creating these movies, and you're out in these kind of remote, wild environments with this tight crew, and you're kind of doing and seeing and being a part of wild stuff. And then it's just yours. Like, only you and your crew know about it for months.
Right.
And then you finally, like, there's this buildup of, like, finally getting to release it. And now the landscape is like, before kids are even home from the day, they've posted the 900 they did, or the crazy straight line that went down that they filmed in 0.5 view of their buddy on there. Right. There's this, it's just instant, and there's so much of it. And there's kind of cool things about each, but there's something special about that movie, or that the way the media was sort of shared, consumed. And do I think that it's still, I think there's still there's something special still about that. But it's hard too, because we're in such a sea of content, and there's so much out there, and there's something also cool about, like, this just happened and I'm watching it. And you feel kind of connected to it, where there's some disconnect when it's like something that happened 6 months or a year ago or whatever. But I guess something I've noticed with, like, production has gotten to be at such a high level. Like, the teams and the crews that are out there making content now, that it's such high quality that you're still, the polished movie at the end of the year is still this gem, this package that is it can't just be replicated instantly, and it can't be matched. And so I think there's still something really valuable about that. And you still see a fair bit of that, of, like, people going to premieres. Like, I almost think it's going to start coming back. Like, we're in such deep saturation of content, and so much. I mean, you already kind of see it with, like, Curtis and Austin's movie, where and Jake Price, they filmed this whole movie on 16 millimeter film because it's, like, cool again. Right? Where that's even wilder, because you don't get to look at the shot even at the end of the day.
Right.
Definitely not at the end of the moment. Nowadays it's like we shoot something, you just can look at it instantly and then you can go do it again and do it better. And when it's shot on 16, you're like, cool, we'll see this in a month. We'll see if I got the shot, if you did the trick right.
Yep.
It was a wild time. And that also had its ups and downs and benefits. And so I wonder if, I don't know how I don't think like social media and clips are going to go away, but the society of like clip me up, versus this big project that you work on in secret and then reveal to the
world.
The world.
Yeah.
I think it's still sick. But maybe it's just my perspective because I was a part of it in the beginning. I don't know.
Well, I certainly agree with you on like it's definitely special. It's special to be a part of it too. And then when you go to premiere, like when you go to a Tower Theater ski or snowboard film and that thing sold out, it is sick.
Yeah.
Like the energy is so cool in there. And especially if like local boys are in it, then like you really feel that. And I think that's something that you can't replicate that at all.
No.
And
especially not on a tiny screen.
No. Yeah. And that's the other thing too, is we did a project last year and Cam filmed it and produced it, wildly talented. I'm like looking at him. I'm like, dude, how are we going to get people to not watch this shit on their phone? Because like it needs to be watched on the biggest TV you own. Like we need it. We want it like a movie. That's kind of the goal. So it's definitely, it's just changing. And I do think that I hope it comes back more. Like I feel like it could for sure, like you said, but who knows? Because it all really depends on like the numbers now.
I know.
Yeah. Which is kind of a bummer too. It's like,
right. It was sweet when it was unquantifiable.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. I hate that they can see all the metrics now and
it's good and bad.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it kind of becomes like a metric arms race.
It does.
And then it's not about, I guess I go back to this quote that I remember hearing from Blake Jorgensen, who's a ski and snowboard photographer, and he's a producer and stuff now as well. But his line was something to the effect of, it was more talking about kind of cameras and how every year there's just sicker and better and more expensive cameras. And he's like, don't get caught up in the arms race. The bottom line is it's about entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
And I just always try to come back to that, like that element of making good entertainment, however you make it. If it's compelling, it's going to work. I hope, I guess.
Yeah.
but yeah, it's an interesting state of things. And
so with the entertainment side of things, and TGR that's been a huge part of your program.
Yeah.
Like I was looking to see how many TGR films you've been in, and it's a lot.
It's a lot.
You've been in a lot, dude.
Yeah.
So congratulations on that. I mean, that's a hell of a career in that aspect. But as you got into that game, how much are you involved in like the creative process of it? And is that something you enjoy?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's changed over the years for sure. Because at first it was like, you're just an up and comer. You're just doing your best to get shots and try to get in the movie. And you don't really know much about the production or how it all works. And in the beginning of the movies were more sort of less about storytelling at first. And they were kind of, they haven't changed much, like trying to reinvent the wheel or trying to create some new ski film format. It's somewhat funny and somewhat good, but the bottom line, it's about entertainment. And it was sort of initially sort of like you had an athlete segment, like people would just have their own segments. Mm-hmm. And it was just athlete segment after athlete segment. But then eventually that kind of became just the norm. And so it sort of was like, well, let's have this more storytelling aspect. So now, like in the TGR movies, it's always been you go on a trip, you have 4 athletes, you have a handful of production people, and you're capturing and telling the story of what went down on this trip, wherever it was, a little bit about the place, the scene, right? It's sort of, and that's some good storytelling and a good way to sort of put these put it into context and make it a little bit more about the experience and less just about like me and what I'm doing kind of thing. Right.
Yep.
And so when I first started, it was just that. Then these kind of pivoted to these more story-based kind of trips. And that was when I kind of started to have more input, both on the what trips and where I would go or where we would go. And then when you're on it, just what the story is and what's and how you're capturing that. And I guess it kind of goes back to like being a professional athlete. There's way more than just being good at the sport, right? Like the best skier on the mountain who skis every single day is maybe not a good pro athlete. And not that you shouldn't be like one of the best, but you just have to be being really good at a sport is a part of it. And then you need to have all these other things that you understand. And if you're just out there trying to be like wildlife, and because just what you're doing is so sick that you're just doing it, and if you guys want to get the shot, you better be set up because I'm doing this now, versus working with the team to create the moment and the shot and working together so that not only am I getting my sick run, but I'm helping the other athletes make sure they get their sick runs too, right? And we're that kind of teamwork and that dynamic that goes down is so powerful. And so the more you get into it, the more you sort of see this well-rounded aspect. And if you're not like a player in the game, if you're not helping kind of be a part of all that, then your talent can only carry you for so long, I guess, and so much. So I really enjoy all those other aspects as well. And sometimes those are like it's the less glamorous, the less fun aspects of creating a production or making a movie or whatever it is that you're doing. But if you put the time into that hard work on the other side of things, it generally works out that you'll get the fun part too.
Yeah.
There's like, especially in sort of Alaska heli skiing, there's this whole drink it blue sort of thing where you're going up to Alaska and you're waiting for these handful of good days, and it's just shitty weather after, just bad day after bad day. And eventually it was, it's sort of the Murphy's Law of like, well, if everyone just gets wasted and is just like, there's no chance that I could ski tomorrow because I got so hammered last night, it'll go blue. So let's drink it blue.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that you're just, because what else can we do?
Yeah.
Like, and it's funny how that would happen, or that became like a thing. Well, at one point that was already kind of established, and we were kind of down in the dumps, and we were days and days of kind of waiting around. And we started this, we were like, wait a minute, let's just go start filming. Let's just start filming these scenes, like all this extra stuff, us getting in our gear and walking out of the hangar, all these kind of things that aren't fun, but if we get them, it'll make for a sick, segment. It'll be the buildup to what maybe will happen. And so we just started going and spending all day in our ski gear, even though it was raining outside, and then all of a sudden it cracks out of nowhere. And we're like, holy shit, we can work it blue too.
Yeah.
Like do the hard work first and you'll get rewarded. And so, those sort of aspects are to be involved in that. Like you're more vested in the whole project. You have a part of it all. So yeah, I really have enjoyed those things. And then, at times have been super involved with the whole film or the segments I'm in. And then sometimes, there's been years where I'm on one segment and then I just sort of hope that the editor will do a great job.
Yeah.
And it kind of comes and goes.
Mm-hmm.
But while on location, I'm part athlete, part producer, part safety guy, part homie, part, just like all these different roles, to part logistical coordinator, part heli, you're just like, just thinking all the elements make it work, to make it the best you can. And I love that side of it. Like I love kind of driving. You know?
And it's certainly, I don't think people understand that side of it. If you've never been in these, like the backcountry shoot and the winter shoot too, like when you talk to filmmakers like I do who don't shoot winter, if they're smart, they're like, oh, I'd never want to shoot a ski, snowboard, snowmobile, snow film ever, like because it adds such a level of like complexity and like, I mean, the amount of days that you just get your ass kicked and like
get nothing.
You get nothing, and you're like, dude, this is killing me. It's just staggering, and you got to really hang on. And that's certainly what happened to us last year. Like last year, I had one of those years where I was like, I can't catch a break, man. Like, how are we gonna like finish this?
Right.
And but that's part of the game. And if you don't love every aspect of it, and really like, you got to buy into that.
So did you guys work at Blue eventually?
We worked at Blue in April finally. It only took 4 months, but and I do certainly, the projects that I've been involved in the snowmobile side, obviously a lot smaller budget production. Just we're not the ski or snowboard industry as so. There's been a lot of days where it's like, oh, we have 4 days to film a segment. It doesn't matter what's happening. Right. Like we're gonna film in the rain. Here we go.
Yeah.
Like, we'll try to make it happen. So, but I'd never actually heard Drink It Blue.
No way.
Yeah, I love that. It's incredible. And so Alaska and the stuff that you ride up there and all your counterparts ride, that's like the one side of the sport that I struggle to relate to, because it's something like I can connect to skiing in so many ways. Obviously snowboarding was my first love, really. And then snowmobiling, like it all kind of connects, but like you're not putting a snowmobile down that stuff in Alaska. Like, so when it comes to that, like when you first started skiing that level of big mountain stuff, like how do you get out? That has to be a huge hump. Of like, you're managing slough and like all that stuff. And most people don't even understand like how much more you have to do than just get down without falling. And the whole concept of like, this is a no fall zone, dude. Like you can't fall here. Was that tough, or is it more intuitive than some of us might think?
Well, maybe a little bit of both. Like it's super disorienting, and getting your head wrapped around. There's so many things to wrap your head around, like you said. And I guess I got in pretty early, which was pretty sick. I think I had been filming for 2 years before I went to Alaska for the first time. So I was early 20s and pretty much just, kind of like that hungry moment of where you're just getting better every day. And I went to Alaska. I guess the first trip I ever did to Alaska was with snowboarders, which is kind of a cool.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So Hatchet and his crew in TGR had always been homies. And so Mike Hatchett was also, film producer from like kind of the origin of snowboard movies, the TB 1 through 9 or 10 or whatever. Anyway, and so I got the opportunity. They needed a 4th athlete. And so my first trip, I went up to Valdez, and it was a filmer that I knew from TGR, and then one of Hatchett's filmers, and then 3 snowboarders. And it was John Jackson, Freddie Kalbermotten, and this guy, Adam Short. And Adam Short actually lives here in Bend.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He has a family now. He still lives here. He lived here then. Hasn't been in the snowboard scene in a long time, but John and Freddie are still in it, and legends in the snowboard world. So it was a cool. I don't know if it was their first time as well, but total just kind of a greenhorn trip a little bit. Those. I want to say it was all of our first time, but we did pretty darn good. We had a sick time, and I was psyched to just be there, and everything was new to me at that moment. And we had some good luck and had a little bit of I definitely had some blissful, ignorant moments that first year, slough being one of them. So it was sort of the climax of the whole trip was this one. We were in Valdez, and it's just these crazy ramps. There's just massive runs and several things. There's a lot of stuff about Alaska that's hard to relate to and hard to adjust to. One of the main things people talk about is scale.
Yeah.
Because there's no reference. You don't have a tree or a ski lift or anything next to it. So it's hard to see and tell how big things are. And everything's big. And so everything kind of looks small almost. Like you just think, oh, I'll take 5 turns there, and then you're on it and it's like 20 turns, right? So there's that element. So this one run, it's this big ramp, and I am fired up. I see my line. It looks pretty, I know about slough. I know what's going to happen, but I drop in and I'm kind of like the first third of the run is this kind of upper flank, and it has a little air at the end of it. And I'm sort of just like I'm skiing down towards the air, and I'm sort of thinking like, oh, maybe I should 360. Maybe I'll just straight. I don't know. And I kind of decided last second, like I'm not going to 360. I'll just straight air, shifty or grab something. Mm-hmm. I land, and then maybe a turn after I land, I kind of get up onto this prow, and I knew enough at that point that the prows are like safe points, because as the slough's coming, if it's coming behind you, once it hits these prows, it'll spread out and it'll go on either side. And if you're up on the middle, the slough can't really get to you. And along the edge was like this 300-foot cliff, like this massive cliff was on the side. And I pull up onto the prow, and I'm just kind of partying down it. Everything is going great. I hit this air in the middle, and I get to the bottom, and then everyone is freaking out. The cloud of slough that had like poured off this 300-foot cliff was just, by the time I get to the bottom, it's like clouding out the sun kind of. It's just this massive cloud. And what I didn't realize was that the slough was kind of like catching me. And I hit that air, land, and get past it and up onto the little prow. And the slough just goes ripping by and off of the cliff. And I'm fine. I did it perfect. But I didn't really realize it. And had I 3'd and crashed or basically like stopped right there, I would have just been swept with the slough, and it looked amazing and made for a great shot, but I didn't plan it out. I didn't know. And that was sort of like one of the first wake ups of like, oh, wow, this is pretty wild up here. So the next time I went up I was with the TGR trip, and then it was with more legends in the sport. Jeremy Jones, Victoria Jalous, she was kind of a pioneer women's pro snowboarder you still watch her footage today. It would go in any movie. And I was and they were like already had been spending time in Alaska. And then also Jeremy Nobis, who was like, he was kind of pro ski racer who turned free skier, and he kind of changed the game because before in this era of like the late 90s, early 2000s, and it was people were riding AK, but they were making lots of little turns. They were slough managing, but they were kind of like almost letting the slough go and staying above it. And Jeremy skied this one iconic face in like 3 turns and like put like super G turns down this face. And no one had ever done that before. The snowboarders were just starting to figure that out because they had this like big plank, and where snowboarding was starting to kind of like open the door of what could be done. And Jeremy sort of knew what he could do from racing, and was just this big dude. And so icons. And so I'm just like in the heli with these guys, and my head's just blown off. I don't know. I don't even get it. And the things that I hold that I now pass down to the next generation on a trip are things that I learned from them, basically, which is kind of sweet. And one of the first things was I was just like, where do you even look? Because it's so vast. It's so much terrain. And how do you even figure out where are we going to go? And then on like a macro scale, and then where are you going to go micro after that? I know how to like look down a mountain and ski it, but how do we figure out where to even start? Yeah. And so there's a lot of things. And I guess I would just say like little by little, spending more time it was one of those things where I just gained more experience and kind of started slow and had the mindset that I was with these people that were much more skilled and knowledgeable. And I would just kind of take a back seat and just sort of watch and try to figure out where I could fit in and what I could do and sort of just take the steps slowly. And it's crazy because it was such a new and challenging experience for me then. And that type of terrain is still my favorite. And I've been filming for 22. This might be my 23rd season going into it. Mm-hmm. And last year I came away from AK being like, wow, I think I'm still as good or better than I've ever been, at least in that aspect, in the aspect of picking apart crazy technical terrain and making it down in one piece without falling off of 300-foot cliff.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, I mean, it's just like a book. Like you just keep going chapter and chapter and learn more and more. And that was one thing that I wanted to ask you about, of because you've been in the game for so long, like where do you think, especially now with like the way that technology is and like guys are starting to take care of themselves and stay fit, and like when do we peak as far as like in these disciplines of sports? Because we see guys that are like in snowmobiling, like Brant is like, he's 50. Yeah. He's pushing 50. Yeah. He might be 50 now. I don't know. I can't remember. But like he rides his ass off and will show any young kid like what is up because of the experience factor too. Yeah. Yeah. So like, I mean, you obviously see that as well. Like you just said, like, man, I feel like I'm as good as I've ever been up here.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy that, right. Where does it go? And I guess it's easy to think like that it can't get any sicker, that people can't get better. But that I feel like is pretty close-minded in a way, right? Because you kind of don't know. And so I've always sort of felt that like it's going to continue to advance. And I guess there has been, it's like a bit of a roller coaster. When you look at freestyle skiing and you look at the tricks, like there's been such a progression of what tricks are out there and how good they look. And at first people were kind of just, if you were doing more than a 720, it looked kind of chucked. Now 1080s look smooth as can be, and 1600s looked chucked, you know? And so there's, like just more bigger in the freestyle world. It's like, has it already peaked? Does it come back to just making the tricks look sick? And isn't it kind of all about entertainment, not about how many spins you did?
Yeah.
You know, like what looks good, what makes people go like, damn, I want to do that. And when it's just like zing, 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 zing. But when it was 1080s, people probably thought that at one point. And so I don't know. I guess where I'm going with that is like that in some of those freestyle worlds, it's kind of gone so far that it has come back a little bit to it making it stylish. And the people who are sort of at the top now in that are not only just good at doing the crazy things, but making it look really good. And so that's come back a little bit. When you look at the urban scene of skiing and snowboarding, there was this where it just got gnarlier and gnarlier and gnarlier, where it was just more and more death-defying rails and concrete and just the craziest things that you've ever seen go down in cities. And for a while, it almost like kind of peaked as well. And now there's this whole element of creativity where it isn't just about doing like this rail on the edge of a skyscraper because there's a lot of risk there. It's more about these creative, almost like riding lines in urban environments where someone's going to hit this rail and air over this fire hydrant and tap it. And then they bounce through some, it's like putting these pieces together. And so creativity kind of coming around. So there we've sort of seen this kind of ebb and flow. And in big mountain skiing, it's definitely been people, when freestyle skiing first happened, and it was quickly said, it was like people are going to start doing like these freestyle tricks in the big mountains.
Mm-hmm.
And it happened. It's happening.
Yeah.
But I think it's taken way longer than we thought. And because of that, we probably haven't seen it peak yet, because it's just so hard.
Yeah.
It's hard just to survive down it without dying.
Mm-hmm.
And so to be pulling like freestyle moves in the runs is just, you have to have such a higher level of control and confidence and skill. And, but even when I was just first that was kind of my thing. I was like, well, I can do some like simple tricks.
Yeah.
I made a whole career out of the 360. Left threes, court trees, and flat spins. It was like, that was pretty much, my bag of tricks is a lot smaller than a lot of pro athletes, but I was able to kind of put some together in some wild places. But I sort of kind of peaked in that realm. And now there's new riders that are in skiing and snowboarding that are doing some pretty high level tricks in the NAR terrain. And I think right now it's almost finally coming to fruition where people really are doing stylish moves, kind of more than just 360s and flips, and putting together like runs of these tricks. And so I just think it's got to keep, there's always more to be done. And that's like what's cool about action sports. What's unique about action sports is that there's all these chapters in the book that you can be reading and writing for yourself at the same time. And as a person doing these sports, you're always evolving. When you're young and you just want to learn tricks and you're just doing whether it's skateboarding, snowboarding, whatever it is, like FM, you're just like, I'm doing tricks. Yep. And then you're a 50-year-old and you've been riding dirt bikes your whole life. Well, you're like, now I'm into hard enduro. Yeah. As I can ride anything and I can go. And even though I'm 50, I'm still in the game, like some of the dudes in the enduro world.
Oh yeah.
Right. So I think it's pretty unique. In action sports that we have this longevity, that there's always new things that you can continue to get better at. Mm-hmm. And you can learn and do some things and then get maybe worse at those. Like there was tricks that I used to be able to do that I kind of can't do anymore. Yeah. And that's okay, but I'm still able to push myself in some realms. And that's a cool thing to have. And just, it's for ourselves, but also that anybody doing it at any level can be learning new things, and you can do them your whole life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so funny you just mentioned the hard enduro thing, because that's like my newfound addiction, you know? Like I've talked to you about it a little bit. Yeah. And like, dude, I'm at this weird spot where I'm like upper mid A, class rider, but like I'll pull up and I'm either getting my ass kicked by a 17-year-old, right, who I got to remind myself that he's probably going to be riding for like KTM in the next few years. Like he's going pro. Yeah. Or this dude pulls up and I can see the gray beard out of his helmet. And I'm like, this guy's in like vet class. Yeah. So I'm like, dude, hey, I got to beat him. But in the next few years, I want to be able to beat him. Both of those kids. Like, this is crazy. So I think that's what keeps me going too. It's like, if I see somebody that's like either younger or older than me, I have the same reaction. I'm like, dude, I'm not letting this kid beat me. Yeah. But I'm like, also at the same time, I'm like, dude, I'm not letting like some of my dad's age beat me. So it's like trying to find this balance and just I was kind of always pushing. But a question for my snowmobilers. Yeah. When did you figure out that snowmobiling was sick?
Dude, it's been a while, man. Yeah. So like, I think I got my same thing. I moved to Utah, and I lived there for probably a couple of years and I was just dirtbag dishwasher working in the lodge. Eventually, so I was probably like 2004 or 5. And I bought an RMK It might have been a 600 at the time.
Yeah.
Old school platform sled. Had a 600 for a year. Sold it. So yeah, it's been since early 2000s. So probably close to 20 years that I've been sledding.
Yeah.
And oh man, just like sledding was it's such a learning curve.
Oh yeah.
It's insane. And so at first I was just doing it to try to like access skiing. Right. And that was kind of the point. It's like my homies there in Utah had sleds and it was like, hey, you should get a sled because we can go filming in all these cool places where you can only get to with a sled. But which is still this common thing in skiing and snowboarding. What most people don't realize is that snowmobiling is a whole separate sport that you have to get good at, even if you just want to go access skiing and snowboarding.
That's a great point. Yes, it is.
And again, having people that can mentor you, that can help you along the way goes so far because snowmobiling is so kind of counterintuitive.
Oh, it's completely ass backwards.
Everything is. I just remember the first time my homie was like, oh yeah, we're just going to roll it over. And I was like, roll it over? What are you talking about? He's like, oh, it's going to be so much harder to get it unstuck in here. We just roll it over. And you're just like, light bulb goes off. You're just, oh, wow. Okay. Roll it over. All right. And then like, there's like, I feel like there's like three common things that the new sledder does is gets out their shovel.
Yep.
Doesn't know to roll their snowmobile over and doesn't pinch the throttle.
Yeah.
And like those things it's scary. Like you're just like, well, this thing, when I pinch the throttle and I'm in some like hard, it just takes off. I feel like I can barely hold on to the thing. And like, yeah, but you're in deep snow. You're sort of slightly uphill. If you don't pinch the throttle, you're going to be stuck again in like 6 seconds, even worse. So pinch that thing as hard as you can and let off when you know you need to, but not before.
Right. Yeah.
Or let off after you think you need to, not before. So those things were helpful to learn from some friends and then just slowly go through it. And over time, I kind of got more into just also snowmobiling. Partly you're like, well, I want to get good at this so that when it is go time, when I'm trying to get to the good lines or whatever I'm trying to get to, I have the skills to do it. And then it's like at first they're just scary. And then eventually you're like, wow, these are really fun.
Yeah.
And then eventually you're like, yeah, I think I'll just go snowmobiling today.
Yeah. It's common, right? Like we've both seen that a lot with guys or friends that are like, yeah, I'm just going to go out there in the backcountry. Like I have 2 kids I went to high school with, both insane. One's like insane snowboarder, other's insane skier. And both of them are just like sledder dudes now. They love it. Yeah. They still ski and snowboard, but like they snowmobile a lot, which is great. And man, the amount of times that I've like you roll up on somebody like new sled and like they're rookie. They're just figuring it out. And I'm like, yeah, let's just roll it. And they're like, well, you're going to roll my snowmobile over? Or I'm like, yeah. Like, can I just ride it real quick too? There's so many of that. I mean, that was my job for so long, was like literally just getting people unstuck. Yeah.
I just did this yesterday. No, we rolled up. I see this guy. He's just stuck by himself, shovels out. I was like, oh yeah, this is a classic move. Another thing that Chris taught me was just like, no, you don't need to get the shovel out. You just stomp. Stomping is the number one thing you can do to get your sled unstuck. Stomp it out, lift it up, move it, drive it.
Yeah.
And he's got his shovel out. So we just go over him, just like start stomping for him, start talking to him. Hey, how's it going, bud? And then we kind of get him unstuck. We lift up his back end, move it over, we're kind of ready. And then so I'm like, I pretty much just wanted to say like, can I just jump on this thing for you? But I kind of asked him and said, I was like, well, I think if we just pull your skis and, you just throttle this thing, we'll get you right out of here. And he's like, oh, okay, really? And I'm like, yeah, just give it all it's got. Just, pinch it. And he doesn't. And he just is immediately stuck again. So then we stomp it again and move it once more. And then I'm just like, yeah, I'm just going to drive this thing for you. And just get right out. And but it's like, you kind of need to go through that. Like, it's not that this dude's you just don't know. And I didn't know until someone showed me.
And like you said, it's so everything is counterintuitive in that thing.
Steering, everything.
Yeah. Oh, you want to go left? You got to turn all the way right. Like, I'm going to hit that tree. I'm like, don't look at the tree. If you look at it, you will hit it. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I'm like, your throttle is your brakes, and your throttle is your steering, and your throttle is your throttle. People are like looking at me going, what? Like, well, here's why. Yeah. It's such a crazy sport. And it's such a boom too. Like in the last 10 years, last 10, 15 years, the whole game changed. Yeah. It's probably, I feel like from 2014, I remember when the 2014 sleds were out, and it was, those sleds it was just made it so much better.
Yeah.
It was like everyone, I was like, whoa, dude, these new 14 sleds are insane. Like, you can do anything on these.
Yeah.
And it just sort of is kind of exponentially progressed.
Yeah.
That was wasn't that about when the platform sort of changed?
Yeah. That I would say that was like the big one that really, like, the really good guys were kind of riding sleds a certain way. I'd say the top pros were riding sleds a certain way. And then the OEs figured it out. They're like, oh, let's make it so the sled is built for that riding style. Yeah. And then it just was like gangbusters.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so like, cause I guess I kind of like entered the pro, like was guiding and riding in 13, 14, 14. And that's when it was, it really kind of exponentially went from there. And now it's like the sled that I pick up from the dealership is way nastier than a $25,000 mod turbo I built 5 years ago.
Yeah, totally.
It's crazy.
Right. The stock sleds now are insane.
Yeah. I like worry about people on them.
Yeah.
I'm like,
I know. Yeah. Everybody's got a short tunnel.
Yeah.
Everybody's just like got all this power.
Yeah.
I know. Same here. It's like, oh damn, dude. Do you know what this thing can do?
Yeah. It's incredible. But I think it's also like what you were saying with the skiing and snowboarding side of things, of like, we saw the riding change so much, of like wrong foot forward and this and that. And now it's like we can ride neutral more than we could.
Right.
Now we're starting to ride neutral a lot more because the sleds got so much better.
Totally.
But now also it's like you have like Andreas Bergmark and Caleb Kosturki, and those dudes are like, they're like, oh yeah, I'm in the trees, but like if I hit that stump at 60, I can do a backflip.
Dude.
And I'm like, all right, I might need to start looking for another profession because this is getting out of hand, guys.
Yeah, it is. I know. It's so crazy. Watching those dudes is baffling. Because I'm pretty like comfortable and confident on the sled, and then you watch what they're doing, and it's so many levels, like just unfathomable, like riding up pillow lines that I would be psyched and probably have a hard time skiing down. I'm watching Kosturki sled up them somehow. You're just like, wow, dude, this is cool.
Yeah. But, and Kosturki is built, I mean, he's built like a linebacker. Like he's like a tank.
He handles that thing like he looks like he could, which is sweet. But sledding it's so fun. I feel like snowmobiling is the most futuristic thing that I do. It doesn't make sense what you can do on this machine. I guess I have this thing that I go back to about skiing, about what makes skiing so sick, and that how skiing is literally flying.
Yeah.
Snowboarding, we're literally like, especially when you break down. So my line is that you're on this temporary crystalline structure that only exists for a short time, which is holding you up above the ground, and you're just sort of standing there, just playing around, and you're just flying around. You know, if you just froze time and evaporated all the snow, you'd be somewhere between 2 feet to 15 feet off the ground, just flying around. And this structure called snow allows it to happen. And so it's just mind blowing what we get to do. You know, that's powder snow.
Yeah.
You especially feel like flying.
Yeah.
But even when it's hard pack, it's still the same thing. It's this freeze everything and wait 6 months and you're going to fall out of the sky. And, you know, and And snowmobiling, you're flying. You can fly uphill and downhill.
Yeah.
All the counterintuitive things about how you move it around make it so insane what you can do. And the better and more into it you get, the more it just becomes a part of you. And you just are looking around and just flying around through the forest, just weightlessly.
Yeah.
On a 500-pound machine, weightlessly somehow. It's insane. And it just feels, none of it makes sense. Like it feels out of science fiction.
Yeah. It's the most special part about snowmobiling for me is that I can go anywhere.
Yeah.
Like everywhere else, I'm restricted to on my mountain bike trail, moto trail, snowmobile.
Yeah.
Just point and shoot.
Yeah.
It's like the speeders in Star Wars you watched,
Yeah.
where they're
exactly.
just like ripping through the woods, flying.
Totally. Yeah. That's one of the things, one of my favorite lines about skiing that I think is unique and it transfers to snowboarding and snowmobiling as well is it's like this, it's like the speed of a moto, but the smoothness of a skate park.
Yeah.
And right, like again, sort of more when it's powder, but it's like if the whole world is a skate park, you can go in any direction and the speeds you can, and skiing, you just instantly are going, you can go so fast. You can get up to 60 miles an hour like that. And like how a moto, just like you pinch the throttle, twist the throttle and you're flying. And with the snowmobile, it's the same thing. You just pinch this thing and you're flying and everywhere is smooth and you're just go wherever you want. And yeah, it's unreal sort of. And it doesn't, it's not a lot of other things where you can do that. Like you said, where you can just go anywhere.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's pretty fun.
All of those are pretty special. And I get in, I wouldn't say arguments, but I was getting into these beefs with like my friends that are like, they will live and die snowmobiler. They're like, that is what I do, dude. I love it. And I'm like, dude, I love it all. That's like my problem almost is like, I get the same rush out of all of it, which is, and you can relate to that too. Cause like I run into you more on a mountain bike than I do on the snow for sure. Yeah. And it just all ties back together. Like, how do we dissect what we're about to go through at ridiculous speeds?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The flow state computations basically, right? I know. I think that is what is so intoxicating, so fun. So like what makes it so special is that you're able to just the reading of terrain, line choice and reading of terrain and in these microseconds. And in order to do that, your brain has to be in the state where you're just so focused on you're sometimes not even like thinking that hardly or that hard about what you're doing. You're almost just taking in information and instantly reacting, but you can't think about much else when that's happening. You have to be just there and open. And not that, I don't think that, I mean, part of it is that it's like a getaway, that it's an escape from the not, just like the challenges or whatever, just the real life kind of nuts and bolts that are happening. But it's more than just escaping. It's about being in that mindset and about how good that is for your mind, not to be escaping the drudgery of life, but just to be experiencing life at such a high level. I think.
Yeah. That's certainly how it is for me, especially when like my friends that are like endurance athletes, I'm like, I can't relate to that because I need to be able to go so deep into this one thing that like, dude, if I screw up here, it's going to be painful. So like, let's focus, I can't be thinking about how my legs hurt when I'm running. Like that's where I struggle. Yeah. But I see both sides of that. It's escaping, but also like, living. I want to have you back on again, and we can talk because we didn't even go into like mountain biking and like that whole side of things. Because you've done some cool stuff in that, like some cool more personal projects or like kind of crossover projects. And
well, I think it goes back to just like you said, it's fun to experience. Like we're looking, I mean, the sports, the actual things are cool, but really what we're there for is the experiences. Yeah. And they're the personal experiences, the personal like moments and growth and challenges, but it's also the dynamic that you're doing it with other people, and changing it up is so sweet. Like going and doing other sports, and just, you're sort of having, it's a different vehicle for the same kind of motion, I guess, or the different, you're just finding a new way to sort of.
Yeah. And you get better at your other thing too.
Yeah.
Yeah. You build that.
I agree.
That skill set of.
Yeah.
I think, and that's also why I'm excited for this process of this podcast with like guys like yourself. When I run into you and say, what's up? And then, we do a lap together and I'm with somebody else. Like, who was that? I was like, oh, that was Sage. Like, that guy's insane. I'm like, yeah, he's also a pretty good skier. I don't know if you knew that, So it's like, just sharing the stories and, just like, man, some of those Alaska times are, you guys are gnarly, man. It's so cool.
It's definitely like one of my favorite things to do for sure. But I also, back to your kind of point about the like relatability of it, I enjoy doing it because it is this sort of pinnacle kind of element. It's the Red Bull rampage of biking. It's skiing in Alaska is like the wildest stuff, but similar to Rampage, there's a lot of people ride their bikes, but no one can really understand what that's like. I mean, even watching it on TV, if you go there and you stand there, you're 10 times more blown away than you are watching on TV. And even watching on TV blows you away, right? So the relatability and it's cool to have those parts of our sport where it's like the wow, like the whoa, this is crazy. But then back to the element of connecting, how it's kind of really just about having a good time and being entertained, both of yourself, and then if you're creating media from it, like the entertainment of it. And one of the things that I've been trying to do the last few years is not just create content or be in films where I'm just kind of doing this wow skiing. That's sort of, while it might look wild and be inspiring or to some people like that, they might even be able to get to do that, but to have that balanced with something that is more relatable. And I've been like super hyped on the kind of creating something around that as well. And like this last 2 years, I started doing like a YouTube series, Let's Take a Lap.
Yep.
And it's kind of the complete opposite of like AK heli skiing. It's all at ski hills, all at ski resorts. And it's just riding with skiers and snowboarders who are my friends. And we're just taking runs. And it's been super fulfilling. And kind of, while I've on one side of like skiing an AK and being able to just get technical and gnarly and wild, has made me feel fired up on what I'm doing in life and skiing. This other side of it that is so kind of not that, like just skiing around a beat up ski hill through crappy snow, hitting little jumps, laughing with your friends and capturing that and sharing that has been equally, if not maybe even more, so rewarding and super fun. And so, so you just reminded me when you're like, oh, let's take a lap. I was like, oh yeah, dude.
Dude.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of how I like to think about it all and kind of fit all the pieces together.
Yeah. And I think too that with like your example of Let's Take a Lap, there's starting to be an open spot in the industry for these, like, you got to be good at what you do, but also like the personality. Because that's what people like really gravitate to. Yeah. It's like, dude, that guy's awesome. Or, so it's cool to see you doing that and, certainly showcasing that. Yeah. And look forward to our next encounter.
Likewise, man. Thanks for having me on here. And it's fun to chat. I love it. I love getting fired up. You know, it's like the season's right around the corner here. So
yeah. I was going to ask you the question that I always get like every day. It's like, are you ready for winter? And I'm like, oh no, dude, I don't know if I am yet.
Yeah, it kind of depends, right? Did you go anywhere this summer, or did you do any? Do you ever do any of those South America?
I've done 3 South America trips.
Okay,
and that's like top bucket list.
Yeah,
to go back, that's attainable right now. Japan is like kind of not attainable at this moment.
Yeah,
but that would be number one. Is like I want to go fly a snowmobile to Japan and do the whole thing and figure it all out. I know it's possible, but. South America is incredible. I haven't gone in a handful of years.
Yeah.
I haven't really gone since 2018 was the last year.
Okay,
or 2019.
Cool.
Yeah. But incredible down there. Yeah.
Well, and I feel like that changes if you get a little taste of winter in the summer, it makes you sort of a little bit more patient.
Yeah.
And then there's every year is different. Some like years, it's November right now. I'm just like, I just want to get like 10 more sick bike rides.
Yeah.
And some years I'm just like, I can't wait to start skiing. And
100%.
Kind of just goes. Again, you just sort of like take it as it comes. And, you know, some years you might be more fired up. It doesn't mean you're not going to love it any more or less than when you start doing it.
Yeah. So, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. New TGR film.
Yeah. Always psyched to be working with TGR, and they continue to produce, you know, project after project, they got another sick movie out. It should be hitting digital release soon. It's still touring right now. What the hell's it called?
I don't remember.
I know it. Beyond the Fantasy. It's always TGR has this long history, and the founders of TGR have like a huge love for the Grateful Dead. And I don't know if it's completely true, but that every TGR movie is either a line or a song or something from the Grateful Dead. So Beyond the Fantasy, there's like so many names and so many that have some sort of cryptic connection to the Grateful Dead.
Yeah.
So now that once I knew that, I'm just like, every movie is, I just claim that it's a Grateful Dead lyric.
Yeah. Well, and they all sound like they could be Grateful Dead lyrics. So it checks out.
Beyond the Fantasy.
Yeah.
And it's kind of true too, man. Like this life. I mean, when I was a Grom and I moved here and I was like, I just want to ski every day. Doing this was a fantasy, and I don't take it for granted. And it's 20 plus years deep. It's like, I still am so fired up on it.
Yeah.
And so that the name is like, it's kind of sweet for me personally. Like,
for sure.
Beyond the the fantasy has gone on so long that it's just like, you got to keep dreaming.
Yeah.
Right. Keep dreaming.
Of course. Yeah. So. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming by. We'll put, I'll put all your links and stuff in the bottom, and we'll be sharing.
Thanks for having me. Stoked to be part of the podcast and
episode 1, action figures.
Action figures.
Sweet.
Wrap.
Sweet. We'll see you later.
Thanks.